Beef Rouladen. The classic German beef rolls that are served in an unctuous sauce and are naturally low carb. I'm starting with this London broil or top round that I got at a big box store, and I'm going to slice it because I have this little slicer into 1/4 inch slices. However, you should have this done at the butcher if you don't have one of these tools, and probably even if you do. Alternately, I could have done this with my chef's knife, especially if I'd put the meat in the freezer for a little while and let it stiffen up so it would be easier to cut. We're going to Swiss it later anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to prepare the aromatics for flavoring our braising liquid, and here I'm showing you how to clean a carrot with a green scrubby as opposed to peeling it. Do it either way you want to, but I did learn this little technique from Thomas Keller of the French Laundry. Cutting round things like carrots can be dangerous, so it's very important to anchor your blade against the board so that you can have more control over your knife, and therefore it doesn't wobble around and you potentially cut yourself or actually mess the cut up as well. I'm cutting these carrots up rather fine to allow them to flavor the liquid more efficiently. The actual cut I'm making here is called a paysanne, but that's probably more than you need to know. A sharp knife and proper cutting techniques makes your work in the kitchen a whole lot easier, safer, and it produces a better product in the end as well. Also, I like using this pastry cutter to get chopped items up off my board rather than expose my hand to the razor sharp edge of my chef's knife. We got to cut up some celery and some onion as well, and I just thought I would show you the technique I use for cutting celery. I split it in half and then divide it again lengthwise, and then line it up and chop it up using what we call the monster grip. Notice my knuckles forward, fingertips back. I'm going to dice this onion up. I'm going to leave most of the root end intact to hold the onion together, and then we'll divide it down the middle, take out the dry outer leaves, and then simply dice it thusly, discarding the root once we've done with it. Okay, here we have our aromatics, or culinary term, a mirepoix, and we're just going to set this aside for later. Now I'm going to cut up some onions to saute to go in the beef rolls, and this time I'm taking the whole root end off because I'm going to make a radial cut or a julienne cut for this particular application. I want the longer slices of onion in this case so that when I roll it up in the beef rolls it doesn't squeeze out the side as easily as if I had diced it. Using the knife, I'm going to make a radial cut around the half of the onion, kind of like if you were cutting the spokes in a wheel. When you get to the end piece where it's hard to hold, just flip it over to the flat side or the flattest side and continue to cut. It's really quite easy. Here I'll show you on a different camera angle the same technique, and maybe you can see more easily what I'm doing, or more clearly rather. And there's the flip, and continue to cut down. My knife is high carbon steel, and you have to wipe it between uses. Put a little oil in a pan, and over medium to medium high heat we're going to fry these onions up nice and golden brown. And here I'm adding some marjoram, which in most of the recipes, German recipes I saw online, was used as a flavoring for the onions. Once they're brown to your liking, just set aside for later use. We're going to return the pan to the heat and add just a little water to get out the brown caramelized bits of onion that's in the bottom of the pan, because all that represents flavor, and so why do we want to waste it? So we're just going to clean the pan up. That's called deglazing the pan, and then we're just going to take that and pour it over our mirepoix to add to our flavor in our braising liquid. Okay, now we'll start our beef rolls. We'll take our beef scallops. We're going to trim up any connective tissue and clean them up nicely. Now we're going to Swiss them by covering them with cellophane and pounding them with a meat mallet. We want to very lightly season them with salt and pepper. Remember, they're going to be getting pickles later, and the pickles have quite a lot of salt in them. Now Dijon or German mustard of your choice goes on. Now I'm using prosciutto because I had it in the freezer and needed to be used anyway, and so I'm going to put down a layer of prosciutto, but most recipes call for using thin sliced bacon and covering the mustard with a layer of bacon. Prosciutto or bacon both has salt in them as well, and so that's just another reason to go light on your initial seasoning of the beef. Then we put down a layer of onions. Remember, we have to roll this up, so don't get too carried away with the onions. And finally, the pickle slices. I'm using dill here because I'm going low carb with this dish. But if you like sweet pickle and you didn't care so much about the carb, use a sweet pickle. I folded that flap of meat to the inside, and now we're just going to roll it up nice and tightly. But not so tightly that we squeeze the stuffings out the edges. We don't want to do that. And then in the end, we'll just pin it with a toothpick, or you could tie it with a piece of butcher string, whatever your choice. Item next is we want to brown them off in some oil over medium-high heat. Notice that I dried them off with a paper towel before putting them in the oil. That'll help them to brown more easily rather than to steam. Once they're brown to your liking, set them aside. Then we'll blot up any excess oil, and we're going to again deglaze the pan, getting up those brown bits which represent what flavor. We're going to keep those. We're going to put them in our mirepoix. Now we're going to prepare our braising liquid. Our mirepoix goes into a heated oven-proof pan, along with all the collected juices that we added in. We're going to add in a couple cloves of minced garlic, a splash of red wine, something nice and dry, sprig of thyme, bay leaf, and we're going to simmer this until it's almost dry. We'll throw in a few whole peppercorns as well, and a little touch of tomato paste. Once we have sweated off our vegetables, we're going to add in our beef rolls and then some good beef stock. This is some I made myself, and so it's very thick and unctuous, unlike the stock you buy at the store. Also, any little retained juices that come out of the beef rolls, because again, flavor. Every 30 minutes, remove from the oven and turn the rolls over, and do this for an hour and a half, or until the meat is tender to your liking but not falling apart. Test for tenderness with the point of a small paring knife. When they're done to your liking, remove and keep warm while you work on the sauce. Start by skimming off any obvious fat on the surface of the sauce. And now we're going to remove the vegetables and the herbs that we put in earlier. Once the vegetables are removed, raise the temp to high and begin the reduction, skimming off any scum that comes to the surface. I'm going to be thickening the sauce with this more than gourmet French classic veal demi-glace. as opposed to using a roux which has flour in it to keep this low carb. This can be found on Amazon. It works really quite nicely, but it is not cheap, about $35 for a pound, but hey, you don't use it that often anyway. And it does a beautiful job of thickening the sauce. Now that the sauce is the consistency that I want it, I'm going to take my warm meat rolls and I'm going to pour the sauce over them while straining it at the same time in order to make the sauce more refined and a nicer finished product. You don't have to do that, but I like having a very nice finished product that looks beautiful and tastes delicious. We'll garnish with a little bit of parsley and then we'll be ready to serve. This is a delicious dish that goes particularly well with two other German recipes, our braised red cabbage and fennel and creamed kohlrabi. For these recipes and other recipes, as well as other videos on low carb classics, please go to my website cheftylermaking.com and check it out. Thank you very much and bon appetit.